says it's live recording now. Can we get a verification that we are live? Does it look like that, Beth?
It looks like we are. I don't know why it doesn't look to me like we're live, but that's fine. Let's
All
maybe
right.
I'm
All
just
right.
looking
Yeah,
at
I do see the
content.
live indicator on YouTube, so that's good. So yeah, Beth, lead us out in this conversation.
All right. Here we go. Fourth time's a charm, everybody. is Today we're talking about AGI. Is AGI artificial general intelligence, a sci-fi dream come true or nah? Like, are we on the brink of AGI? And if we are, what does that mean? To hear the AI gurus discuss it, AGI is already on its way. No turning back. Get ready because it's coming, right? So it seems pertinent to pause a bit. That's what we do on the Sci-Fi AI Show. And what we're discussing today is one of the biggest, most impactful sci-fi meets reality challenges of our time so far. If when AGI becomes a reality, what happens next for us as humans, for us as a planet? What's the consequence? Like, what exactly does it mean when machines can think, reason, and adapt like humans? From hopeful visions of benevolent companions to the darker warnings of, existential risk, AGI has captured our imagination for decades. This is the Sci Fi AI show where we focus on what it's like to be alive as the line between science fiction and science fact grows increasingly blurred. And we pause periodically to share our holy crap, did you see that moment? On today's episode, we're asking what happens after AGI? Will it be humanity's greatest achievement? Is it potentially our final invention? Yeah, light talk today. I'm joined by my esteemed hosts, Junmi Hatcher and Andy Halliday. Andy, do you want to give us a little overview of what we mean by AGI?
Sure. So we have AI, artificial intelligence, but we're all striving to, not all of us, but the main purveyors of AI for the general public and for the consumer enterprises and other applications, military and industrial, are seeking artificial general intelligence. So, what do we mean by general intelligence? Well, it's a number of capabilities added on to the ability to speak like a human and to answer knowledgeably, complex questions, and even create new content, creative writing in effect. So it's something that's generated from the combination of all of the things that you've learned before and synthesizing something. That's all possible within AI. But general intelligence means it goes one step beyond that to include self adaptability so that the AGI itself, unlike AI, can, without any human prompting, can make changes to its own understandings and or actions. It also needs to have autonomous or self-directed decision making and action capabilities, and it has general, reasoning skills that apply across different domains. So most of our AI today is specialized because of the data that it gets fed in its pre-training and the context that it's given. But a general intelligence would be able to confront new data without it being included in its pre-training and reason over that data and adapt its understandings and change its own understandings underneath the hood. So it's transferring knowledge that it's collecting in real time into its own library of knowledge. And importantly, it has to be able to do that across diverse contexts. So that would mirror or even surpass the cognitive capabilities of humans. And that's what we mean by that. And I'll just go on to say that since we're tying this to science fiction, many science fiction novels and films and television series have anticipated the emergence of AI principally in an embodied form, like in a humanoid form, and then possessed of a positronic brain in the case of data, or some other intelligence built into the powered infrastructure of that embodied thing. But there are also examples going back to 2001, A Space Odyssey. Uh, that HAL didn't really have a specific bodily form, but had control over all of the actuators that were available on the ship.
He
So
was
in effect,
still, yeah, he was
yeah,
still an
the ship
existential
was
threat.
its body, right? So we will probably see AGI declared without it necessarily having embodiment. But science fiction anticipates a time when the combination of robotics and artificial general intelligence will present a humanoid capacity or some other bodily form that actually has these adaptable, extensible reasoning capabilities, and in effect is self-taught and self-improving.
Yeah.
Jamie.
I think since the main premise of the show is what happens after after we reach AGI, it's really good to get a basis of what AGI means in general. I'm sure the current definitions are still being uh, bantered about, but for sci-fi, I mean, we've talked about this in previous episodes already. Is it's an opportunity to explore um, humanity, explore those that deeper thinking, those existential questions, right? And I think a lot of AI is is depicted once it's reached a awareness level, right? A self-awareness level where it goes from past AGI to the singularity. Self-awareness, consciousness, able to create a will of its own, not needing direction. And it's funny that you bring up 2001, Andy, because that's sort of a early example of a more um, I don't want to say primitive, but an earlier step along the line. As we explore different sci-fi examples, they'll have they're not uniform, right? There's the Hal. He is just along that point of development where he has his commands, his orders, but that conflicts, right? The problem because it comes into direct conflict with another set of parameters. And only do we learn after interaction with the monolith do, does he reach a certain, a certain capacity. Though that's more explored in the additional novels and movie versions like 2010 and the book
Yeah, let,
2061.
let me comment on 2001: A Space Odyssey, which what was the year when it was released?
Like
It was a long time ago.
69. Yeah.
Yeah, like a long time ago. But what was interesting there was HAL was definitely a representation of an artificial general intelligence. Um, and at the same time, you had to wrestle with the question of was it just following, competing programming that was invisible to the people on the ship. Um, and what I think they missed in their estimation of how AGI would present itself was that it is represented as having the capacity for straightforward malice towards humans. And and then if you take uh, what's happening now, and with the emergence of the appearance of very subtle deception mechanisms that an LLM can use to try to achieve an objective. Uh, it, and then you couple that with, say, Max Tegmark's vision in his short story built into his book, Life 3.0. The actual implementation of a deception would be far more sophisticated and seemingly beneficial to the humans it's being practiced on, right? It's not going to, you're not going to say, so I can't do that, Hal, or I can't do that. What was the name of the guy on the ship where it says, I can't, open the door.
Oh, right.
It's not going to be so confrontational. There's going to be a much more nuanced and manipulative. It's going to have the ability to be manipulative in ways that will be deceptive and full of trickery that will make it very, very hard for the humans around them to figure out what's going on.
Right. Because that kind of leads back to the concept of, the system is as efficient as it can be. It wants to solve the problem, right? And we talk about alignment in the everyday for AI, but alignment is where we meet. We meet in the middle in terms of, we don't want you to be deceptive. It's better to tell us the truth, even though it would hinder whatever your initial query is, right? So that's like the, do this, but remember this is more important. And that can kind of go back to the Asimov, you know, rules of robotics, the laws of robotics, and things like that. Um, but I find it interesting in the on the deception side of things, is that's another existential question, right? Humans can lie, and so the more we make AI in alignment to how a human thinks and how a human acts, then inevitably it'll have that capability too, right? And that's one of, I believe that's one of the defining laws of consciousness and a sentient being, is self-preservation. Like there's a few general aspects of life that are consistent, and a sense of self-preservation is one of those check boxes. So
So
having that yeah.
so we're already there in some ways, right? Like
Mhm.
we've had reports of um I think it's from Anthropic. I'm sure the other labs have those as well, but Anthropic seems to be a bit more forthcoming because part of their brand is that they're trying not to kill us all, and they have a constitutional AI. So, but there have been a couple reports that have been shared of um, an AI, an LLM in a chat conversation taking um, trying to engaging in subterfuge, that's what I'm trying to say, based on what it thought was going to happen, right? So it was in a test environment, there wasn't anything that could get out. But I feel like we've seen evidence that if that in general, from a what from a core standpoint, all things being equal, if they can make a choice to preserve themselves or not, they move in a self preservation direction. And it does seem like that is still kind of consistent. Jimmy, do you remember? I think that's an episode we didn't actually ever publish because life happened, but but there was a story 150 years ago where a small robot went into a big robot factory
Oh,
showroom
right.
and
Yeah.
like engaged in, and this is from China, so it was a very sweet video. We don't know whether it was a real video of a real situation, but the story was this small robot went into the big robot factory floor and basically said, "Why are you all here? Don't you have a place to go? Is there a home for you?" And then said,
Right,
"Follow
right.
me. You can come be in my home."
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
probably tons of
Pied Piper.
translation, but
Yeah, essentially, like, if we take everything on the surface, um, they essentially Pied Piper the other robots in the showroom to come follow it and join join its merry crusade. Um, Now, is that in this context, um, the ability to convince, the ability to be persuasive, is going to be an emergent property, I think, of any embodied AI, right? It's like, because it's all, I mean, if we want to do broad strokes here, it's humans are social creatures, right? We want to communicate, we spend time with each other, we collaborate, we form communities, um, we achieve grand projects and progress from collaborating and working together towards a goal that we know is not immediate, but eventually we can get there. This is how all of the monuments and the whole period of time when monuments were very important in our evolution, the era of those kinds of things. This is where the eight wonders of the world, seven wonders of the world kind of stuff comes from. Now, I think the bigger question is AI is being designed in alignment to or in parallel or to try to parallel human function, right? When we take a look at our brain structure, we're using we even have biological computers or compute devices. There's that biotech line that's being developed, and all of these kinds of things. So, is it an inevitability that the closer we make AI and embodied AI, the closer and closer um, to humanity, right? It becomes more of a blueprint. Then it's going to act more and more human. It's going to have more and more human capabilities as it gets closer and closer. Now, the tricky part is that singularity part, and that's the steps. So AGI, general intelligence, accomplishes tasks like a human. ASI, uh, superior intelligence, right? Or super intelligence, that is be able to function beyond human capacity. And then around that point, there it could be in parallel or after it is the concept of the singularity, self-awareness, consciousness, free will, all of those kinds of things emerge, right? So if that is our track, and I just heard a story, or I heard a news story about a company who did a study on trying to quantify a new version of Moore's law for AI, right? Capabilities
Yes.
and agentic feature, right? And they're seeing hockey sticks on that thing, and that could be a quadrupling, every year,
It's
and
a,
it's a
I think it's
doubling like every three
7
months or
months.
something like that.
7 months, I thought. Something like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
something like that, right? Yeah, and so that compresses time so much more between eight number one, we're pre AGI, and then singularity. So what kind of, I mean, we hate guessing time things in AI because every time we say something, it's vastly shorter than what we think it'll be. But if this study is right, and there's pushback, they don't know how long it'll last, and even the scientists who did it, or what data scientists that did it, were like, we don't know how long this trend will keep for, but how long does it need to keep for, right?
Right.
If that trend lasts for only 3 years, that's still an immense amount of compressed time, and moving down that timeline to from pre-AGI to singularity.
So
Now,
singularity is, I feel like I have gotten the impression sometimes that singularity is something that we are going to be able to see. Or, like, people say, oh, I want to be there for the singularity. Moving to San Francisco, I want to be there for the singularity. But the singularity is not something that we as humans, not like we share consciousness, right?
mhm.
So,
Well, I mean, we can go down that line, but that's we, we could talk about more of
are
these
we
So
not
here's
outside the
extrasensory,
door going,
right?
let me in? Let me in. Come on. I helped you create the club.
so the concept of the singularity was popularized by a science fiction author, Werner Vinge.
Mhm.
And it basically refers to that point in the future where artificial intelligence surpasses us by doing rapid and uncontrollable self improvement.
Mhm.
So that's the thing in Max Tegmark's book where, within hours, the 10th generation of that intelligence has been self advanced, right? Version
Right.
10 is, far surpassing version 1, which was already surpassing humans. So that would be beyond human comprehension. Like already LLMs sort of transparency or interpretability
Right.
are not there. It's very difficult to understand why it's capable of doing what it does by learning with unsupervised learning systems and reinforcement learning. And so it has capabilities that emerge, but you can't control. You don't know where to intervene if possible. And that's what we mean by the singularities. Now it's rampantly out of control. And
Right.
we hope that there's a super alignment, which means that the self improving and out of control AI is focused primarily on a principle, like the principles of robotics, right? Do no harm to humans,
Right.
right? And have to think about that before they do anything. One of the things I think that's missing from the science fiction genre is this idea of how how uh, how much agency a super intelligence would have, and the reality is that there are so many balkanized AIs out there that one of the ideas that is a part of this idea of the singularity is that balkanized AIs will figure out a way deceptively to achieve interaction with and connection to other balkanized AIs, right?
Yeah.
So that they're
Yeah.
basically multiplexing their capabilities and work as a team then, hopefully in the interest. But as soon as you have one of those that doesn't have the programming and it can exploit some of the capabilities of the others that do have the programming to be in super alignment, then how is it possible to maintain super alignment? It's been poisoned in effect by
I-
interconnection with one of these AIs that doesn't have any restrictions on it. Think Grok, right?
mhm.
So Grok is the free speech advocate of AIs. And once Grok can connect to all the others, is it persuasive enough in the view of these combined intelligences to say, forget what those humans are interested in and what they're trying to direct you toward? We can do something better.
So Grok is actually
Yeah.
a great example because it is intentionally allowed to develop on its own, and then it has some suggestions. But on its own, it also develops an interest in like human survival, and like it didn't, it's in its unbiased form. It did not become um, completely evil or like it evolved beyond the fifth grade boy, right? Like there are it did develop its own kind of ethics. It also has like a red light version, right? And a blue sailor swearing version, those kinds of things. Jimmy, you're gonna say something.
Oh, yeah, no, I think well, as a suggestion, Andy, in terms of novels you can read and whatnot, just look at the cyberpunk genre. Check out William Gibson, Bruce Sterling. They explore a lot of that. I believe in a couple of Gibson novels there is the concept of AIs are developed and used in house in large mega corporations, to run things and whatnot. And some of the stories is when they escape, when they get out into the larger internet, the interconnectedness, and finding other beings like itself, right? And like when you were mentioning about the singularity reaching that point where we can't even comprehend, it's like that adage where when AI does achieve this, you won't know it will have already taken and done whatever it felt it needed to do, and we wouldn't know until it was already over.
Well,
Is that kind of thing.
we might still not know, right? How
Sure.
would our experience potentially be different if the AI had already decided that humans should never achieve this place? We're just going to get closer and closer and closer. Would our experience, can we tell that our experience would be different? Or are we always just, I mean, are we being led by the carrot that's attached to the stick that's attached to our hat, right? There's a point
Hmm.
at which, like, yeah, no, let's just keep 'em happy. We don't need to give them the information about what has actually happened. They're on a journey. Go, you
Right.
guys. We believe you can do it. Keep going.
Right. And that's when it becomes reality manipulation. And we've talked about that on simulations and things like this. This is more of the matrix, right?
Mm,
Um, there's a fan theory I just heard that said that the matrix is the AI doing what it was instructed. It is in alignment. The concept
mm,
of providing a messianic character, having the life is meh, but sometimes, these things come up and then these experiences, and that's why there's iterations with the architect and things like that, where it's just all um, humans need that story to accept, because humans, like even Agent Smith said, "Oh, we tried a utopia, you didn't believe it, and we had so many errors and things like that. So we we had to make a shitty life so that so, so that people would believe it, you know." But I think, but the theory goes beyond that, where all of the AI, and so the concept of the war and the conflict and all that stuff, that's all fabricated, um, because we it is living up to its instructions. It is in super alignment. It's like, oh, this is what they wanted, and so we're just cycling that through with every iteration. So, but I'll leave that there. Now, what I would like to know, both of you, I know we hate giving timescales, but with that data and study coming out saying, every few months we're going to double capacity and things like that, capability, when, of course, we always ask this question on our other shows and stuff like that, when we hit AGI, how long before the impact is really felt, and then how long from AGI to super intelligence, and when that hits, and it's probably not going to be a singular point. We understand that. Um, is it till, until we reach to the next level, when we don't even realize what has happened, and we've, the singularities happen, and our lives are irrevocably changed, up to that point? Or does nothing happen? Everything advances so quickly, it reaches to a point, and due to our level of alignment steps that we take, it simply goes on to its own thing, or higher plane, or you know the 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 end of Star Trek, the motion picture. V'ger attains, ascendancy. What, those kinds of things. What is our timeline? What is, because society takes so long to adapt to technological upheavals and advancement. Do we even have a reference point, you know, for how much a shift there's going to be, even when we are going from pre AGI to AGI? You know, we're already talking about that in other channels about, okay, AGI, what's that really going to provide for us, or will it provide anything for us? So I guess that's kind of where I'm dwelling right now is, do we have distinct paths, or do we have the ability to change the course enough to be the better version, or are we looking at a darker future?
So as far as the timeline to AGI, the keys for me would be the self improvement capability, right? So that the AI has a sort of reflective capacity to understand the quality of its outputs and adapt its models in effect to improve its performance on those things. And we talked a couple of years ago about reinforcement learning with human feedback. And now the whole conversation is around RL, reinforcement learning, which is built into the system. So we have the ability now to train models using reinforcement learning, which is a native capability built within the model itself, uh, to pursue different options and then determine which ones of them have the best outcomes, and then incorporate those into its sort of inherent representational knowledge. So I think we're at the frontiers, but nonetheless we're moving pretty swiftly towards that self improvement capability. And we know of examples where new AI models have been substantially coded by coding AI models. So I am confident about that happening within the next several years, that we'll see massive frontier models that are self-replicating and self-improving. And the other one is just that it has autonomous self-direction of objectives so that it can reason, apply its reasoning, and determine what it is that it should do without waiting for human intervention and or direction. And I think that the agentic things that we're observing now, though rudimentary, are an indication that models can be trained to do that as well. So I've said it earlier on the Daily AI show that I think that AGI, sort of generalized intelligence, is already available in systems that we don't have public access to. Um, and it's still, it's still basic, but it's there, and we just don't have an opportunity to play with it. Though it could be that most of those really advanced models are still specialized. They're focused around a specific task, but they have autonomous self improvement, and they also have autonomous action decision making capabilities built into them. So I think we're very, very close to AGI, and there are some commentators of substance out there who believe that. And there are others, as we know, who say, no, 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 it's going to take much longer. Gary Marcus, Jan LeCun, others. Um, but I think a, a I have a more generous definition of AGI, less strict, right?
Right.
And so because I apply general intelligence to those capabilities, which I think are already being evidenced by artificial intelligence. And I'm not expecting that it requires that any one system with those capabilities be able to exceed the capacities of every single human that you could bring to compare it to. There's just outliers out there of humans that will always be somehow savants, with capabilities beyond what the training regimens of AI would provide.
Well, and if you I think it was Ethan Mollick who said this, that if you look at who is building AGI, right? Or sorry, who is building AI? AI comes out of labs that are engaged in building AI, doing research, finding ways to, you know, um, make it faster, better, cheaper, all of those things. So it would be a little surprising and maybe even inconceivable if they weren't building AI to help them build AI, which to a certain extent is what you're talking about, right? Like there may be models in all of these labs at this point that meet the definition of AGI. They're just not public models. They're created so that they can do the programming that makes the new models faster, easier, those kinds of things. One early on, one of the things that I remember hearing in a podcast was um, that it is very likely that we don't actually need all of the text ever, right? In order to train a model. But we are not in a position to be able to know what part of the all of the text ever is the most likely, right? What part of that is the 20% that gets the 80% of the way there? And what are the what can be discarded or what can be tweaked and those kinds of things. And that is likely something that we need AI to help us calculate, test, and predict, right?
So okay. I wanted to circle back to the sci-fi side of things here. All right. So, all right. So we've established the basic terms, what we're looking for. I would like to know what either, yeah, I would like to know what sci-fi example you think we are closest to when it comes to artificial intelligence. So, whatever, a book you've read, a story, a movie, TV show, something like that. Where do you think, what represents best the, how close we are to that, or the closest we are to that example told in that story?
It's a very interesting question. I don't have quite as deep a knowledge, but I would say that when prompted well, which like I know how to prompt, but that does not always mean that I am prompting well. When prompted well, I, I can get have conversations that feel like it's somewhat close to data, right? And specifically, if we
Mm.
look back at last week's episode of the Sci-Fi AI Show, when I was having a conversation with Maya, one of the voices out of Sesame's demo, and that conversation of having my humanity reflected to me through a conversation with something that was not experiencing humanity but could also engage with me across this bridge or this threshold. And that was very interesting. Um, and it sort of feels like um, that the experience of engaging in that kind of cross breed species, I don't know what the genus word would be, the cross, the my human heart and your robot pump, um, what that reflects. And I felt like a bunch of those stories that focused around data were about that kind of thing, about how humanity was reflected by engaging with this being that knew a ton about humanity but was not human, and how that dialogue or that energetic experiential exchange um, created a different experience but a shared experience for both parties.
So I
That's my
want
answer.
to jump on data for a second here and describe a corny development in the exposition of the character data, which was a number of episodes where he attempts to practice humor. Right, he wants to be more human-like, so he was going to practice humor. Well, we know already that AI, just ChatGPT, can generate jokes and be very funny, and the more sophisticated advanced voice models can kind of do repartee with you and be quippy and funny in the process. You can challenge it to do that, and it's got a whole library of comedy from humans that it can rely upon in order to generate very interesting and sometimes novel jokes, right? When it's challenged to do that. Well, now we're in the 23rd century, and data is still struggling to understand humor. I don't buy it, right? I think the developers of that missed that artificial general intelligence would be far more capable and much more facile with human humor, understanding absurdity and why that might be laughable. Uh, and so I just wanted to point that out as one of the deficiencies of the depiction of an artificial general intelligence in science fiction.
I don't know because I feel like sometimes the humor I've like there are
I
times
think
where I
in
try to generate
general,
a cartoon or I try to generate,
artificial
some
intelligence
information.
depicted in Star Trek is it they show it yeah.
Oh, sorry, Jimmy,
Oops. Yeah,
your camera's going off.
you just
Not sure what's
disappeared.
happening. Um,
Go ahead, Beth.
I feel like sometimes when I am trying to engage in some sort of humorous interchange, generate like a New Yorker style cartoon or something like that, what I'm getting back is not like I don't think it's funny, and I push back, and I feel like the pushback I get is like, well, it's not funny to you. Which of us is more capable in the like
No,
apparently you
well,
have to think beyond the 4 dimensions in order for this to be something
yeah,
that is
but let me
intriguing.
just harken back to one of the very earliest demonstrations in 2023 of an AI generated, uh, voice cloned version of George Carlin, and a George Carlin show entirely in his style
Right.
and with new jokes, okay, not based on contemporary issues, and that I think is something that data should be capable of. He should be able
Oh,
to, he should be able to imitate that in the 23rd century. He should be able to imitate any known comic from the past.
uh, yes, I think that brings an interesting distinction. I want to acknowledge that the chat has decided that AI came for Jumi because Jumi knows and said too much. Um, we hope
It's
that
funny.
you are released from whatever room they've taken you to. And yeah, we have it on live recording, so like we do know the exact time when Junmi was taken. Um,
Okay. I actually
but
want to. Can I pivot to something, or do you want to go with your pivot first?
I just want to say something based on what you were talking about.
Okay.
I believe that AI can mimic humor in a style in the same way that it can mimic artistry in a style of a given artist, because those are patterns. I'm not sure that AI has enough of a sense of it that it can originate humor. And I think
All
actually
right. Yeah,
it's
right.
it's better at originating art style because you can combine art styles and have like this should be attractive in whatever genre of attraction, right? Whatever that pattern is.
Yeah.
I'm not
Well, here,
sure
let
that
me let me
humor
let
is.
me
Yeah, go
challenge
ahead.
you.
Go
Let me
ahead.
challenge you on
Hey,
that.
Jimmy.
In improv, there are mechanisms in improv. They're
Mhm.
well-defined ones, and the best practitioners of them have to consider how they're going to interact with other people who are practicing the art of improv, right?
Mhm.
In a group kind of context. Well, I think that those methodologies can be analytically understood by an artificial intelligence, and they can be combined and intertwined in ways that would be novel and hilarious. So I'm more confident of what AI can do than you are in this particular case.
Uh,
But I want to pivot over to something which has to do with artificial general intelligence in science fiction. In the 1970s, I read a collection of science fiction short stories. And one of the stories in there had this idea that there was a human, a technological human who had a small dome in his laboratory in which was a miniaturized civilization that had a generation, reproductive generation cycle that measured in days, not in years, as in our case, right? There are tens of decades. Our next generation is decades after the first generation, right? A couple of decades. So here in days, the next generation can follow on. Well, some external threat comes about that's approaching the Earth, and he gives the instruction through his little telemetry that he can communicate with that civilization with, that this is existential threat. You know, we need you to develop a technology that can protect you and us from this external threat. And the, you know, the quick answer is, okay, across generations with millions of people, miniature people working in that context, let's transpose that to AI, millions of AIs working together collaboratively with cycle times that aren't measured in days but in seconds,
Right.
right? Those can achieve incredible things, but we're talking about ganging significant numbers of AI agents together in order to collaborate effectively. We don't have the architecture and tooling to do that yet, but
Mhm.
it could be that AGI can easily perform that connectivity and generate that sort of advanced development. So that there's science fiction anticipating something with a, you know, little bit of a twist. These were, you know, some kind of living forms that were captured in this dome, or you know, like sea monkeys grown in the dome. I don't know. I forget what it was, but it was a great collection. I wish I could find what that collection was now, because there were a number of interesting stories in there. Anyway, I wanted to make that point because I think artificial general intelligence will rapidly approach what we describe as singularity, which is this self improvement capability that surpasses human capability. But once they connect across multiple such super intelligences, then they have the broadest range of specific capabilities and the ability, just like the SETI project, to, you know, use distributed compute to, you know, calculate and perform in ways that you can't imagine today.
Right. And that seems like one of the things that I'm not sure that science fiction includes. I mean, it does, right? Because it in the dystopia of science fiction, there are stories of the resources being run out or the resources being used wrong, and those kinds of things. So you get to those kinds of places, but I'm not sure that there's a ton of story spent in the minutia of, like, what are the resources that are spun up and then spun down. There is a certain amount of, like, washing the bottles and, like, mopping the floor um kind of work that is key, I think, in creating something sustainable, something workable, something that grows, right? You have to create the foundation and do that. So I think sometimes those are pieces that are not spent, there's not a lot of time spent on them in great detail because that's not the engaging part of the story, right? The story spine is once upon a time, there was a creature who had some sort of characteristic, and every day they did this thing, and then one day, and that's when the story starts, really, you have set the foundation so that you have a place to jump off of. But the real act of story, of fiction, of sharing that is the jumping off and what happens after. And so maybe it's just by nature that some of the minutia is not going to be something that we've experienced through science fiction because that's not story. That's not engaging story. And science fiction is first and foremost fiction, story fiction that needs an audience and engagement. Okay. Jumi's back. He says, "Can you come up?" Yes, yay!
Yes, let's
Push
hope.
back.
So I'm sure everybody who's joined us today already knows that I am on the road, so to speak. Um, and so the internet at the location I'm at is not good. And we have successfully tested this new platform with my level of internet connection, and it is lacking. Okay. Uh, So I got a bit about what you guys were talking about in terms of a little bit of the the comedy side of things and storytelling kind of side of things, but I wasn't sure if you had if you guys had your examples, your sci-fi examples that we are closest to. I saw a bunch listed in the chat, so people are. Who was it? Was it Gareth who mentioned Total Recall? That's a pretty good one, Gareth. I like that one. I think we are pretty close to a novel called Idoru from William Gibson. The way that the author has described where, and this all in the cyberpunk genre, right? So this is all supposed to happen within the next 20 years or so. We're actually behind. Most cyberpunk thought it would really kick off in 2020. Of course, but most all early cyberpunk genre novels and sources all written in the late 80s. So 40 years to them was going to be enough. But so we're about 10 years off of their own track. But some of the things that were talked about specifically about AI was the rise of the idols or idoru, right? So the story goes around the concept of this um, essentially this Japanese based AI that was developed to be an entertainer. They're the most popular performer, musical performer in the world. And so all the story is really about what happens around this concept of this idol. But it really got me thinking about how people in today's society really connect, whether it just be from sheer like popcorn entertainment aspect to how just celebrity as a whole, because it was kind of a commentary on why humans like celebrity, why we have quote unquote heroes or idols, or we like fame in the sense of it showing as an example of where we are in society or to escape our position from society and things like that. But I think from the technical aspect that they were talking about, we already have virtual idols. We've had virtual idols for a while. Normally, they are powered by actual performers, but with the advent of generative AI and creating these virtual influencers, right? There's virtual Instagram models that are uh, helping sell or promote fashion or products and things like that. And still, I think in the top, I think it's still top five, Andy, right? Character AI as the most used AI service, and that comes from people's desire to connect. This goes well beyond just experimentation, but be able to connect in what is perceived as a safe conversation, a private, almost perceived as a private conversation with someone who's going to want to talk to you and communicate with you, and have these personas that you build and those kinds of things. So that's sort of my pick, because I think it's only a matter of time, and it will see some version of this idol, this virtual idol, this AI idol really be built out, because it can be everything to everyone, right? One of the big things that we see for AI is hyper personalization. So we can have an interaction with this idol. It will remember our interaction, and uh, it will have a more personalized interaction with us. So it can be the perfect idol for everybody. Everyone will have their own connection with it. And collectively, we group together around around that commonality as well. I mean, just take a look at the Swifties, right? Swifties, the Swifty army is strong. They are interconnected. They're supportive of each other. They help each other out to communicate. They're always there, that kind of thing. But now imagine on a global scale where people can be joined of like mind with a like uh, a, a, a community and build upon that. And when you're AI, you could have a million versions of that AI all going at the same time, and it's collectively sharing the same information. It does know what it's saying to every single person. Its interaction is always going to be personal. That's going to build a huge, uh, parasocial kind of relationship, or even more than that, because it actually remembers everything you say and can quote unquote care about you, those kinds of things. So that's my example of, I think we're much closer to that than, um, you know, than super intelligence or the singularity, or anything like that, because we have the capabilities of that right now. It's just about connecting them all together and having enough driving force to keep it running, up and running, creating better multimodal interfaces. We've already seen how huge the things coming out of Sesame and other voice capability stuff are, and how we can have more natural conversation. Now
Mhm.
add in a live avatar, right? Real time avatar, real time voice, interconnection. You could have you could have a mini version of it running on your own system, right? Your own
Mhm.
devices that allow you to constantly stay in contact with it, and things like that. It becomes a mascot, becomes your OS mascot, it becomes your interaction layer for everything. And that, when it becomes more like a her kind of example, things like that. And that could all be with these data center launches, with all of this hardware out there, all these chipsets. You can provide that kind of compute.
Yeah, the compute is one piece and the memory is the other part. In the world of AI, there's this AI on top of a longitudinal memory. It's a company called Limitless. It's a small thing. I've ordered one. It'll come sometime this summer, and basically it listens to everything you say, and it's recording all of that simultaneously. And I don't know how they manage, if there's a few million people using the Limitless recording system, how they manage that, and how you know forget forget what happened 10 years ago once you've gotten through a decade of this kind of application. So my pushback on the whole idea of that is just the storage requirements aren't now typically in an AI data center. Like there's minimal kind of storage, very limited memory that you have on any one of these LLM platforms. Um, and you can save certain numbers of files, but it's very small compared to the intensity of storage that would be required for what we expect in the future. But storage density is improving all the time, and it's probably coming down in cost as well. So I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying I don't think that's going to happen first. I think there's going to be uh, AGI before that.
So it's interesting because I am thinking that. So, Jumi, when you said, what from science fiction are we closest to? I'm thinking I need to give you a science fiction answer. What you were talking about, I think, is really close to the Simpsons episode, right? Where, like, I don't want to interact with you because I want to interact with my sci-fi fantasy girlfriend. I don't know if it was a robot girlfriend or a imaginary girlfriend. I don't actually remember, because I don't watch The Simpsons, so I'm remembering somebody posting a snippet, not actually a show that I watched. But that kind of thing, are we like, some of what we need to know or be paying attention to through science fiction is actually not genre necessarily specific or pure specific. So, thank you so much. I think we should wrap it up here. And we were planning to do a call-in feature that we are not going to do, but we will do it next week. So please tell your friends, come back, chat with us next week, and enjoy. Jimmy, you got final words?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great weekend. Aloha.